Hello, good evening, and welcome to another edition of The Boogeyman. You may have noticed I haven't done a video in quite a while. The reason for this is I've actually been quite busy working on a new approach to the channel. I actually want to focus on fictional storytelling, which is actually my passion. I adore mythology and any sort of fictional expression, and so I want to kind of be a little bit more true to that. So I've been working on an anthology of short stories, which I refer to as the Devil's Toybox, which I'm actually going to try to deliver through this YouTube channel, just to kind of be a little bit more true to myself. It's the mythologies created, it's the philosophies that are expressed, it's these sorts of things that I wanted to explore, so I figured that the best way to do that would be to actually tell stories. So this will be the first entry into the series, Devil's Toybox, which I'm kind of experimenting with. This will be a little bit experimental, so please feel free to let me know what you like, what you dislike, what you feel I can do to improve a little bit more, and also just whether you liked the story itself. A special thank you to my friend Mark Holmes, aka Junior Primate, who helped with a little bit with the sound design and a lot of the music. So without further ado, this is the first entry into the Devil's Toybox, which is called Jonathan's Bones. Enjoy.
The wheel brought Jonathan a sudden headache, crippling him. The bright sun beat down, and he was surprised to feel a moment of fear. He cursed that faithless betrayer for bringing them to him, that fickle woman. He cursed the love that had weakened him.
For the most heinous crimes of murder.
The decree quickly became empty noise to him, nothing but wind. He closed his eyes and thought of Julianne, of her sweet face, of the delicate look of horror as he tore into her from every angle that he could, devoured every inch of her soul that he could find. A hand pushed on his back. He imagined the salty taste of her tears. He opened his eyes to see the wheel, and he made a silent prayer to himself. He prayed that she felt every vicious touch of his hands, felt the cold shackle of her chains for the rest of her life. They strapped him to the wheel. He lifted his head up as high as he could and smiled in spite of his situation. He was pleased by the audience he had gathered. He wondered how many of them were family members of his toys, of the people he had enjoyed. The straps tightened. He felt the spokes digging into him. He tried to adjust, his body craving at least an iota of more comfort than Catherine's device was offering him, but of course there was no comfort for the wicked. He took a deep breath that was cut short by the fall of the iron cudgel, splintering his left shin. His jaw shut tight, his muscles contracted. Another strike to the same spot, and his bone collapsed in the space between the spokes. Curse you all, insignificant insects! Snap! His right elbow pushed too far backward, collapsing far quicker than his shin. Crack! His left ankle. Pop! Everything started to fade, his vision becoming blurry. He tried harder and harder to imagine all these tortures put upon his toys, but he felt the warmth of blood as his bones started to puncture out of the skin and could feel parts of him growing cold. Even though he could barely open his jaw, so clenched was it in pain, he forced a smile and began to laugh. And in that laugh was the vision of suffering, of fear that they would never put on his face. But oh, how he had put it on the face of their loved ones. One final blow, and his mind finally gave him the comfort of shutting down. In his dreams of pain and anguish, the killer of 600 men, women, and children, Jonathan Genniper, dreamed of his knives and clubs, fantasized that the broken and shattered bones he felt were the bones of his many victims. He would dream these dark dreams for 3 days, before he finally slipped into oblivion.
Erin thought the house was a steal, a ripe area for any historian. He valued being in one of the richest historical areas of New York. Although he regretted being somewhat distant from the city, in his heart Manhattan would always be his mistress, he was fairly certain his wife enjoyed being in a calmer area. So did Rusty, their 14-year-old German Shepherd, apparently. When Erin opened the doors to the house for the first time, Rusty ran inside, twirled around 3 times after his tail, and then looked at them as if anticipating their reaction to be much of the same as his. Laughing, Erin was sorry to disappoint Rusty by patting him on the head. "Glad you like the place, old boy." Ariel mockingly patted Erin's head. "And you?" she asked. He breathed in deeply. "I don't know," he said, feigning disappointment. "It all depends." "Depends on what?"
On acoustics.
He smiled at her. "So you're a musician now?"
No,
he said, grabbing her by the waist, pulling her in close with a goofy grin.
but I do like to know the place can carry some sound.
She smiled just enough to encourage him. They had been through a lot in the past few months, and it seemed for a while that the firm wasn't going to be what they had hoped. And then a break, and before they knew it, enough to make plans. Permanent ones. Perhaps even plans that involved children of the non-furry variety. "Well, let's get unpacked first, Mr. Frisky." He pouted. "Well, that's no fun." She punched him on the shoulder, hard enough to bruise. He laughed at her as he lifted her up, literally sweeping her off her feet. She laughed dizzily. "Oh, well, if you put it that way," she relented. As his owners did, whatever humans do in their spare time when they weren't throwing him toys and generally being good masters, Rusty explored the area around the big house in the yard that was to be his playground. What was that smell? Acidic. Fleshy. He zeroed in on the target and began digging. He would continue digging for hours. Luckily, his masters were otherwise occupied. And finally, he found the source of the smell under all that dirt, the smell growing stronger and stronger. Erin hadn't slept like that for years. Then again, he was a much younger man the last time he had been so energetic. Groggy, he slipped out of bed at the smell of coffee. As he walked past the front door, he heard a scratching. "Ah, fuck. We forgot Rusty out last night." Ariel laughed from the kitchen, where she had already begun prepping an admittedly basic breakfast of pancake and eggs. "The yard's fenced in. I'm sure he was fine." When Erin opened the door, Rusty defied his female master by covering in dirt and carrying a very ancient-looking bone. Erin looked in awe, laughing. "You were saying?" Ariel looked over from the kitchen. "Oh, for fuck's sake," she muttered. "Is that a fucking bone?" Erin coaxed the bone, with a bit of difficulty, from Rusty's clenched jaw. "It looks like a femur?" A crack in the bone. He wondered silently if the damage had been from Rusty's clumsy excavation. Erin tried a more delicate examination of the hole in the backyard, after eating a hearty breakfast, of course, and found a few more specimens. All of them appeared cracked in similar ways, and from his experience, they were definitely human. "We live in a fucking burial ground?" Obviously, Ariel was less than pleased. I don't think so. From the damage to the bones, I'd say it was an unmarked grave. Probably has been there for maybe even a few hundred years, give or take. "Oh, so we live in a fucking ancient burial ground." Well, that makes it better. Erin saw a flash of an image he assumed was some sort of daydream. Ariel was splayed out before him, bloody and broken. He shivered for a moment, attributed to the state of the bones and the realization he was probably staring at the victim of some sort of early settlement capital punishment. "I'm sorry, what was that?" "I said that you were a fucking bonehead." Although she was serious, he laughed at that. "Yes, I suppose I am. It must have been that Malaysian tomb that tainted me." She rolled her eyes. She had heard the story of his adventures in unearthing foreign tombs far too many times for them to have much impact. "Can't you take those somewhere?" He laughed, donning the voice of a child. "Our somebody is scared." Ariel put a hand on her hip, and even as she did so, she thought how much she had become her mother, but she honestly also didn't give a shit. "Our somebody never wants to get laid ever again?" Erin decided to take the bones to his firm to see if he could get them carbon dated. It was small at first. Just a little something in the way he walked, but Ariel was beginning to feel like her husband had changed somehow. Become a little less of a smartass and a little more of... She wasn't sure what exactly, but something had changed. An affair, perhaps? Although she highly doubted it, the possibility teased her. She wasn't sure how to approach him, so she kept it to herself. Still, there was something very off. Erin was growing increasingly annoyed with Ariel's incessant fucking questions. He wasn't philandering with any harpies. Still, the lack of sleep from the nightmares was beginning to get to him, to drain his mood deeply. Why had his subconscious become so obsessed with the thought of Ariel in various positions of torture? He wasn't into the kinky stuff, and yet, every night when he closed his eyes, it seemed he could only think of her bones snapping, of her skin tearing, of tears falling from her beautiful eyes. He once woke up from such a nightmare to find himself fully erect. I need to see a psychiatrist, he thought to himself. This isn't fucking normal. And there was Rusty's disappearance. How the hell did the dog get out of the yard when it was fully fenced without digging a hole somewhere? The latches had all been tight, but still, the old family friend was nowhere to be found. They had even put out flyers with his picture, and yet nothing. What was going on? Did you ever get those bones dated? It was a simple question over morning coffee. She had not meant to make any offense, and yet he had become immediately agitated. I'll tell you when I find anything out. Don't fucking bother me with incessant, unprovoked questions. Ariel wanted to be angry, wanted to smack that arrogant look off his face, but she also couldn't help but think that he would probably collapse if she did, in a heap of exhaustion. Jesus, when was the last time he had gotten any sleep? It had to be an affair. She didn't want to address it directly out of fear she was correct, out of fear she would see the lie on his face as he denied it. She wasn't sure she could handle it. In his dream, he lured Ariel into the bedroom through amorous wiles. When she got to the bed itself, he took out a blindfold. Although hesitant at first, he convinced her to indulge him. And with rope, he proceeded to tie her up. He found himself detesting the weakness of flesh in general. Found himself fantasizing about beating into it until it gave up its secrets. And so he indulged a bit more, and grabbed the bone he had been examining for months now. The delicious bone that spoke to him, that revealed secrets to him. Secrets that had a twisted sort of reality to them. Secrets about what happened when a human being stopped breathing and passed on to become an object of fascinating obscurity. A toy. He woke up in a cold sweat and was thankful to see Ariel beside him, drooling on her pillow. Never before was he so thankful to bear witness to her drool. Ariel decided perhaps she would just give him some space. Maybe the move itself had gotten to him. She knew he enjoyed the city, so she decided to stay in while he visited friends on the island. Plus, since it was a mutual friend, if he was indeed cheating, it would be fairly easy to keep dibs and find out once and for all. After he left, she cursed herself for being so ridiculous, for being so vindictive. It wasn't like her, but she decided to forgive herself. They had been through a lot. She promised herself she would allow herself this little petty test to secure her certainty, and then be done with it one way or the other. She sat down to watch her favorite television series, a huge bowl of popcorn on her lap. She lasted approximately 2 episodes before she was drooling on the arm of her chair. The sound of the door opening startled her awake. Was it Erin? She wasn't expecting him back that same night, but maybe something came up. She tried to laugh off her fear, but she found her heart pounding in her chest made that difficult.
Hello? Hello?
Nothing but silence. That was not comforting. She decided not to make any more noise. She looked around the living room for objects that could be makeshift weapons. She cursed her living room for being so goddamn safe. The creak of wood as someone passed the entryway. She swallowed hard, clenched her fists tight in anticipation as she tried to sneak in the darkest corners of the house to get to an area where she could see who was in her house. She sighed with relief when she saw Erin walking slowly into the kitchen. Jesus, you scared the piss out of me. He didn't flinch, did not react one bit to her. It looked like he was sleepwalking. Are you all right? Erin, he turned to her suddenly. Who? Wench, there's no Erin here. She saw the knife in his hand, bit her tongue to make sure she was not dreaming. This isn't funny, Erin. He rushed her, smashing her across the face hard with a closed fist. She felt her nose break and a fine mist of blood that exploded into her throat. Jonathan Genniper, you'll be kind to recollect. She was too stunned to know how to react to the sudden pain she felt, but she had enough instinct to know to fight back, so when he started moving towards her, she kicked him in the groin hard enough to make herself flinch at the impact. She heard a satisfying clang as the knife hit the floor. She rushed to grab it, but he had recovered and stomped on her hand hard. She heard a small snap as delicate bones disconnected from the joints. She screamed in pain, but she pushed all her weight toward him, hip-checking him into the cupboards. "Oh, you goddamn shrew," he cursed. "You'll pay for that." She put all her weight into another hockey check, this time lifting her elbow up to his throat, but she tripped over the knife and instead she merely pushed past him. He used her momentum to smash her face into the cupboard. Everything became blurry as her already broken nose shifted, and one of her tooth chipped from the impact. She felt her throat fill with warm, thick blood. He bent down to pick up the knife. She swung around, prepared for the feel of the blade, but too disoriented to do much about it. Instead, she saw a look of horror on his face. His lips moved pitifully. He looked at her, at the blood. "Jesus," he muttered. He dropped the knife. She fought, unconsciousness, as hard as she could. But she could feel her body becoming limp. Blurry silhouette, she saw Erin stumble, slip on the blood that had spilled from her nose on the first strike, regain himself. She rested her eyes for a moment, just needed it. The next time she opened them, Erin was gone. She stumbled over to the phone, dialing 911. When dispatch answered, she just started crying. Luckily, she had called from a home phone because she proved so incoherent that they had to trace her location. When the police arrived, they weren't really sure what to expect. They approached the door cautiously, knocked. "Police," they announced authoritatively. The bruised face that answered the door caused them pause. "Ma'am, is there anyone else here?" they said, already looking past her. "No," she muttered weakly. "Who did this?" asked one officer as the other pressed forward into the house. My husband." As the ambulance medic dealt with her grievous wounds, the officer searched the house. She had admitted that she had passed out and wasn't sure he might still be in the house. She had sounded distant as she confessed that she had lost consciousness. It seemed prudent to do a quick sweep, so Officer Daniels did so as his partner Barry talked to Ariel to try and find out the full story, as well as to talk about the inevitable charges. Daniels was fairly certain he wasn't going to find anything. All the flashing lights coming from outside, coupled with the sirens. From his experience, spousal abuse was a firecracker, spent quickly and dramatically, but usually the courage of the pieces of shit that beat their partners fizzled out and turned them into apologetic flubs of cowardice shortly thereafter. Bedroom. He found a blindfold sitting on the bed. He couldn't judge. Still, it spoke to the domineering type, but otherwise clear. He passed toward what looked to Daniels like an office. He opened the door and saw a computer desk that validated his theory. What he saw on the floor made his blood run cold. Jesus fucking Christ. He managed to exhale. "Is there anywhere your husband might have went?" As he asked this, he saw Daniel step out of the house. He looked ready to vomit. This caused Barry pause. He had watched Daniels venture into a murder scene and came out talking about being hungry for tacos. What in God's green earth could make him that pale? "Are you all right, Daniels?" Daniels looked up at his partner. Yeah. Ariel found it odd that the officers had requested she stay away from the location for a short while, even after the medic cleaned her up and cleared her. However, when they came to her the next day to advise her on contacting domestic services, the picture had become a bit more clear. They prepared her, cautioned her that the photos would be disturbing, assured her that a cleanup crew experienced with such things had done wonders and erased any trace. But still, Daniels insisted. He wanted her to know just what kind of man she had married. The photos had made her blood run cold. Rusty lay in pieces on the office floor. She began to immediately cry as the thought of how much pain he must have endured. But she tried to crush the thought out, clenching her jaw shut, biting down hard. "Oh my God," she said as she felt the blood in her body run frigid. She endured one more glance at the bone he had brought home, jammed so far down his throat that he Before she could even imagine the damage done, she looked away. "Oh my God," she repeated, as her body started to violently shake from her sobs. That was the last she would see of her husband's work.